I think we're going through a period of time culturally, both in the US and abroad, where it's cool to be a victim. It's cool to say, yes, we didn't hit our sales goal last month, whatever, insert excuse here. That's how we get sympathy now. That's how we get acknowledgement and affirmation as a person. If you're doing well, you might get a couple likes or comments on social media, right? But if you fall down, sprain your ankle, and take a photo of your big, fat, black and blue ankle and put it on social media, because apparently people want to see this, right? You'll get hundreds of people that you didn't even know you were connected to, wishing you well, thoughts and prayers. And that's nice. But what it's doing is it's reinforcing that victimhood is the way to get attention now. And instead of focusing on, really applauding people who are moving forward and making an impact.
This is the Play Your Position podcast, where we huddle up, call the plays, and inspire you to run your ball into the end zone. Are you ready to score more game-winning touchdowns in your life, business, and career? Then listen up, because it's game time, baby. Now, here's your host, Mary Lou Kaiser.
Hello, Team PYP. Mary Lou Kaiser here. Welcome to another episode of the Play Your Position podcast. It is game day today. As you can see, I have an amazing guest who is suited up, metaphorically speaking, and ready to take the field. Her name is Valerie Hayes, and she's coming to us today from a beautiful community north of Houston, Texas. So Valerie, are you ready for kickoff?
I am absolutely ready for kickoff, Mary Lou.
I am too. So team, here's some things that I know about Valerie, and I'm going to read this because it's just so well done. She is what we call a fractional COO, an EOS integrator, and Valerie is on a mission to help overburdened entrepreneurs, small business owners, and CEOs establish their business as an industry leader without working 24/7 for 365 days a year. And she is here today to give us some actionable insights on how you can balance running day-to-day operations with implementing your ideas so you can grow, so you're not mired down in those operations and you can really take your talents and skills where they need to be. So Valerie, I am so excited that you're here. And right out of the gate, let's get started with you sharing with Team PYP the story of when you got the call to leadership. How old were you? What was going on in your life at the time? Was it one of those moments where you knew in a moment, or was it more gradual?
Well, I think that's an interesting question, because for me, first of all, leadership starts with personal leadership. You cannot lead others if they observe that you cannot lead yourself. And for me, that started when I was very young. I had the unfortunate experience of having parents who were good people, but were not good parents. And so everything that I wanted to create in my life, I had to do myself. And so I remember when I was in the 6th grade, I used to jump on my little, blue pedal bike, and there weren't speeds back then. There was just the pedaling. And I would pedal my bike down to the library, and I would check out a whole bunch of self-improvement books, books teaching you how to do things that I knew I needed to do. I felt like I had potential, but I wasn't getting any mentoring or coaching or direction from my parents. And so I would pile all these books in a little basket, and pedal home and devour them all. And then the next weekend I'd be back again with my little bike and basket. And I learned from a very young age that if I wanted something to happen in my life, I had to do it. Yeah. And obviously, as an adult, those lessons became very, very helpful, because I think that even though it's wonderful to have mentors and coaches in your life, we see a lot of people who ask for advice and ask for input, but then they don't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the crisis we're having in leadership right now. We don't have leaders who are engaged in personal leadership. So it's very difficult for them to lead a business or an organization.
Yeah, that's an interesting line in the sand. There's personal leadership. I call it self-leadership, personal leadership. And then there's leadership as we think about it in the business world, whatever industry you may be in. I mean, there's educational leaders, there are entertainment leaders, certainly manufacturing and athletics. So talk more about, if you wouldn't mind, personal leadership and why that's so important in today's business climate, and maybe tie it into the work you do as a fractional COO.
Well, fortunately or unfortunately, anyone who has been a parent knows that your children watch everything you do, every single thing you do all day long, every day. And as parents, it's very, very tempting to say one thing but do another, right? And your children then grow up learning to do what you do, not what you say. And although I'm not trying to belittle employees or team members in any way, it's the same dynamic in the workplace. Employees see what you're doing and how you're doing it. And if you're someone who tells people that you're going to have something done by such and such date, and then it doesn't happen, or if you're someone who is abusive towards employees and then tells people to treat everyone with respect, everybody's got that in their vision statement now, right? If you're not walking the talk, your team members see that. And that belittles you in their eyes. They see that you're not a leader. They see that you're not hitting deadlines or producing high quality work. And so they're thinking, well, why should I? Why should I hit deadlines? Why should I produce high quality work? If it's good enough for the boss, it's good enough for me. So you have to take that personal leadership of holding yourself to a higher standard, not only from your personal life, but into your professional life. There's no real separation of who you are as a person. I mean, you're not one completely different person at home and one completely different person at work. That just doesn't work, right? You're either organized and proactive at home, or, you're messy and a hot mess, wreck, right? And I think it's easy when you're running a company, when you're the leader of a company, to feel like people don't see the little things that you bobble on or that you don't do well. And I'm here to tell you, as a fractional COO, they see everything. And what you need to do, if you're one of those people that is not naturally organized, you have problems hitting deadlines, that's okay. That typically means that you're a creative, out-of-the-box thinker, and you've kind of got lots of things whirling in your head at once, right? And what you need to do is you need to hire people who are better than you at the things you're not good at. A lot of CEOs make the mistake of hiring people that are maybe average, right? Let's just pretend I'm the CEO and I'm not good at hitting deadlines. I'm going to hire someone that I think is pretty good at hitting deadlines, not someone who is exceptional at hitting deadlines, right? And if you want to achieve your full business potential and the potential you have for growth and creating other opportunities in your communities for people to be employed, you have to hire people who are better than you at whatever you're not great at, right?
Right.
And most CEOs are really, really good at sales, right? And they're good at thinking of new ideas, but they're not so great at implementing them, right? And so what I'd like to do is make it as cool to have a fractional COO as it is to have a personal trainer. Right? Because the reason you hire a personal trainer is because you're supposed to work out because everybody says so, but you don't want to have to take the time and energy to think about what you're supposed to be doing. So essentially you hire someone to follow you around in the gym and tell you what to do, right? Lift this, pull that. Well, a fractional COO does the same thing. They think about things that you don't need to spend your time thinking about, and they figure out how to do them, and then they make it happen. And studies have shown that the CEOs who bring in someone to operate the company are able to achieve their business goals faster, because what you're doing is you're really hiring speed, right? You can do it yourself, but do it yourself always takes longer. And you maybe don't get the quality results you're looking for, or you can pay someone to come in and work alongside you and make it happen And when you do that, it happens bigger, better, and faster.
Yeah, absolutely. So who is an ideal client for you, Valerie? When you think back over, you haven't been a fractional COO your entire career. You were in HR for many years. So you've seen the inner workings of various kinds of enterprises. But when you imagine a perfect scenario for you, so you can deliver your magic, so you can go in there and say, listen, I can show you how fast you can get there. Just, give me this chunk of time and we're going to do it. What does that client look like for you?
Well, it's typically someone who's been in business for at least 3 to 5 years, and they've hit a plateau and they're not being able to break through it on their own. And the biggest part of it, though, the most important element, is they have emotional courage, right? It's really easy when you're the boss. Oh, I know how to do it. And we're just going to bully through, and I'm going to hit this square peg into the round hole, And you have to be self-aware enough and have the emotional courage to say, I'm not good at everything, and I don't have to be. I don't have to force this. I can bring someone in to help me. And that kind of person is open to the feedback that's sometimes necessary, because sometimes the change that we're trying to initiate or the transformation we're trying to create is very easy and everybody's on board. Okay, that's like 20% of the time, right?
Okay, yeah.
The other 80% of the time, at least one or more people don't think it's a good idea. And as a fractional COO, you have to manage that change, get everybody on board so that we're headed in the right direction. And sometimes that involves difficult messages to the CEO or owner, where you're saying, look, I know that you've been doing it this way and that's worked for you, but continuing to do it this way is the barrier to helping you be successful. Sometimes it's recognizing that team members, it's time for them to go. Maybe they didn't grow as the business grew, but there's that emotional connection to that employee who started out with you. But by continuing to have them on the team while the other high performers see that member isn't really contributing at the same level, again, that erodes your leadership. So it's really, I'd like to say it's like, oh, it's your financial acumen or it's your ability to talk to customers. But the ability to grow a business is all about emotional courage.
Wow. I like that. I like that phrase. We hear the phrase emotional intelligence getting tossed around, and that's just one small piece of a much bigger pie. And I've heard the opposite of to be courageous, right? People think, oh, well, if the opposite of being courageous or having courage is to shrink down, to hide, to run away, basically. And it's actually, no, it's conformity. That's a definition I've heard, to conform to what everybody else is doing or what you've always been doing. Well, this has served us well. I know I've met lots of people who are in that mindset. I've been in that mindset sometimes. What's the definition of insanity? Going and doing the exact same thing and expecting different results. And so bringing someone like you on to really get into the nuts and bolts of, a COO is Chief Operating Officer, operations. How are we doing things around here so that you are meeting these amazing goals and objectives you've set for yourself in a company? And I imagine, Valerie, that you've encountered lots of leaders who really have that resistance barrier to bringing in a person. What's the value of a fractional COO versus hiring a full-time COO?
Well, a fractional COO is typically focused on working for a business that has grown, right? But they don't really need a full-time COO, right? Full-time COO comes with, at least a big six-figure salary with some executive perks and bonuses, et cetera, right?
Right.
A fractional COO. So most companies that are in that 750,000 to 2 million range, right in there, they don't really need a full-time COO as far as 40 hours a week, right? Now, they typically try to get around this by hiring maybe a project manager or an operations director. But that doesn't solve the problem because the problem is at the leadership level, not the management level, right? And a project manager and operations director don't have the overall arching responsibility for the organization to really implement change across functions. They might be able to do it in their individual function, but they can't do it across functions, right? And so the advantage, the gig economy is everywhere now, right? And this is a great opportunity for small business owners because they can access fractional C-suite executives like a fractional COO, a fractional CFO, CMO, Chief Marketing Officer. I had someone message me yesterday who's a Chief Revenue Officer, so that's kind of sales. So it's really a great time for businesses to engage with fractional leaders to help them grow their business bigger, better, and faster. And it's different from a consultant because typically when you're bringing in a consultant, they're doing work for you, right? Right. They're producing something for you. And here it comes at the end. And now it's done. And now it's going to the next thing. And that's great for a lot of situations and, businesses. A fractional executive works right along with you. So they're coaching you, they're coaching their staff, they're developing the organization. They're part of the organization, not a consultant who's more of an external piece who interacts. They're actually part of the organization. And then they help you grow until you get big enough that you need a full-time COO. And then I leave because I'm bored. Because I want to go fix something else.
Honest, right. Yeah. And right. So what you do really reflects the changes that we're seeing in the way business is getting done. I find it interesting that now companies like Upwork, which is one of the first players in the gig economy for creatives, copywriters and designers and stuff like that, is now advertising during Major League Baseball games and national football games and their message is, this is not, they have an old guy, like a zombie who represents the old way of doing business. And then the message is, this is how business gets done today is we bring in these fractional experts who can help us achieve a significant goal, get us to that next milestone. That's what you do. And then you move on, and then they're in a position where, okay, now we can actually consider bringing on somebody full-time for this position, correct? That's, in a sense, what you're preparing them to do.
Yes, that's correct. They would bring in somebody full-time. And in a perfect world, we would be promoting from within.
Yes.
So, for example, I have a client that I'm working with that I started out, when I started working with the client, there was no one who was even remotely promotable to a position of running the organization. Now I have one short-term option and two longer-term options, right? So there's 3 people in the organization that, depending on how things evolve over time, could eventually step into my role if and when I leave. And so as a fractional COO, not only are you dealing with daily situations, you're also trying to project in the future and plan for that, right? So in 3 or 4 years, is there someone available who's been coached and mentored and brought along to understand the business and change management and leadership? Is there someone who can step in the role? Because that's the easiest way to get a COO, right? To promote from within.
Absolutely. However, you see organizations where no one's ready for that yet.
Yes, that's so common. And sometimes, unfortunately, it's because the owner or the COO has maintained control of all the decision-making responsibility. They're not pushing decisions down to the lowest level possible in the organization. And when you as the CEO or the owner retain control of all decisions, you're not developing your leadership core.
Right. And that's a role, that's, to me, that's one of the requirements of that role is people that you bring in to help you build your vision. You want them to lead.
Yes. And this is the person who feels like they can't take a vacation or they can't be off on holiday for a few days because they keep getting questions from their employees and, they're still tied into what's going on every day. And although that makes them feel very wanted and very important, right?
Right.
If you can't take 5 days off without having to, interact with several of your team members, you have a leadership problem.
You do.
Bad news, yeah.
And it starts with who you look at in the mirror every morning.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And that's, I think, one of the hardest places a place of realization is I need to work on me. I need to take time off, not just to go sip umbrella drinks on the sand, but I really need to go away and spend some time. I call it doing a self-audit, a self-leadership audit, where you really look at, okay, where have I been? Where am I now? Where do I want to go? And how am I the bottleneck? How am I the bottleneck to this progress, this forward progress that I want? And for people who like football, and you and I both like football, the game, can you imagine if the quarterback had to, if every other player on that field on his team had to come to him and say, now what do I do?
Right.
That's the premise of Play Your Position is we've got to know ourselves, and it's a constant evolution. We don't arrive at a finished place and say, okay, I know everything I need to know now. No, especially with the way the world works, which leads me to my next question, Valerie, which is you have this amazing perspective, 30,000 foot view on what is happening in business today. So you brought up that there's a leadership problem in a lot of companies, and personal development is a key part.
It's halftime here at the Play Your Position podcast, and we've got ourselves a great game. While you're up grabbing another snack and topping off your favorite beverage, make sure to subscribe to the show so you never miss another play. PYP is available on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever great podcasts can be found. Now, let's get back to the game.
What else is contributing? What's one of the causes to the chaos that, from quiet quitting to quiet firing to the great resignation, besides COVID? COVID is its own thing.
Right. I think we're going through a period of time culturally, both in the US and abroad, where it's cool to be a victim. It's cool to say, yes, we didn't hit our sales goal last month, and it's because blah, 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 blah. Whatever, insert excuse here.
Right.
That's how we get sympathy now. That's how we get acknowledgement and affirmation as a person. If you're doing well, you might get a couple likes or comments on social media, right? But if you fall down spraining your ankle and take a photo of your big, fat, black and blue ankle and put it on social media, because apparently people want to see this, right? You'll get hundreds of people that you didn't even know you were connected to, wishing you well, thoughts and prayers. And that's nice. But what it's doing is it's reinforcing that victimhood is the way to get attention now. And instead of focusing on, really applauding people who are moving forward and making an impact. And I'm just concerned that the victimhood sort of culture makes you complain about everything that happens in your life that you don't like. Maybe your gourmet sandwich has wilted lettuce or something. I'm not sure why you think I need to know about that, but okay, right? They complain about everything. And if you're complaining about the little things in life, you're not able to deal with the bigger things in life. And running and growing a business, and even being a team member in that business, running a business is one of the most challenging personal development experiences you'll ever have. I think it ranks right up there with parenting.
I agree, 100%.
Because to grow your business, you have to grow you. And that doesn't mean you have to be perfect at everything. That means you have to pick and choose. I'm really good at these things. I sort of am really horrible at these things over here. And I'm a big enough person. I have enough emotional courage. I'm going to hire someone to do those things. Right?
Yes.
And I think the victimhood thing it traps people in a process of never moving forward on anything, because all you do is complain. And instead, we should be thinking to ourselves, how did I contribute to this situation, right? Maybe your your lettuce is wilted on the sandwich because you didn't order your lunch and eat it until 3 o'clock, right? Okay,
Right.
I can see that. If they made the sandwich at 11, it's wilted at 3, right? We need to sort of get out of our own way and stop being victims about every little thing and stop being triggered about every little thing. If you want to get to the end of the road of where you're trying to go, you need to stop, stopping at every point along the way when you see a rock and you want to complain about it.
It reminds me of a Seinfeld episode. He was dating the understudy to Bette Midler. She's in a play, Rochelle, the musical. And the understudy is the biggest victim ever. And she drops her hot dog on the ground. They're at a softball game. And Jerry's like, what do I do here? She's crying. She's making this big deal over dropping her hot dog on the ground. And he doesn't know. Goes over, there, it's going to be okay. But it's the point.
Exactly what happens.
The humor in that, obviously, and that was back in the 90s. So, this whole victimhood thing, I think, has just become amplified because now everybody has access to putting their own troubles out for attention. And without naming names, I did see recently on Instagram, I would say a B-list celebrity is in the hospital and is having some cancer treatments. And boy, oh boy, exactly what you just described. Just the outpouring of, oh, poor baby, and I hope you're okay and everything. And it's like, okay, great. So you got attention for that. But, how is that adding value to the greater conversation? And that's what you're getting at is how do we use these tools that we've now have access to, whether it's a social platform or it's a podcast like this one, or it's YouTube with a video series. What do you think, what would you recommend to listeners for how do we use these platforms to move in a direction away from victimhood into a more robust and proactive conversation?
I think it goes back to what you were mentioning before about conformity. You have to be willing not to conform. You have to be willing not to post those kinds of things on social media. You have to understand the social dynamic that creates. It creates a dynamic for you getting attention for being a victim. It also creates on the person who's posting, they're getting their feel-good moment by empathizing with you. And they're feeling better about themselves as a person because they empathized you. Wouldn't it be nice if I felt better about myself as a person because I did something productive instead of just posted on social media, right? So I think what was going to happen is eventually, right, it's starting to happen now. There's so much content out there on social media that people are starting to feel overwhelmed by it. And, it's like they see it all, but it doesn't make any impact on them at all. I think eventually we're going to get to a point where people are going to draw back from social media. I think we're also already seeing that. But I think as a person, you have to understand that the things you come into contact with, the internet, social media, professional organizations, anything, it's your responsibility to use those programs, information, access wisely. Right? When I was growing up, people were like, oh my God, if you watch too much TV, your brain is going to turn to mush. Everyone thought, oh, TV is going to kill the world,
Right.
I watched lots of fascinating documentaries, classic films, and I don't feel like my brain turned to mush. So it's about how you use that information, how you approach those resources, what is your perception of them. I certainly see all the stuff on social media. I just scroll right by it. I don't let it impact me. It doesn't trigger me. It doesn't upset me. I just scroll right past it because I have made a choice or a decision about how I'm going to consume that information. And I think if you're going to complain about social media, which, has its faults, you also have to be willing to say, but I'm consuming that social media responsibly. You can't do both.
No, you can't. And that again is a self-leadership decision. It's being aware that, okay, social media, the internet are here. The world is becoming more and more digitized every day. We are now operating in two worlds, the analog world or the natural world and the digital world. And it's been pretty much a free-for-all. In fact, I had a conversation yesterday with a man who he's a Hollywood insider. He's been working in Hollywood for over 30 years. He worked his way up the ranks. Fascinating individual. And he was saying, when it comes to the attention economy, which is what you're talking about, and making decisions about self-leadership, at the end of the day, we choose to either go in here or not. And as a leader of a company, that's something that you have to set the stage for too. How are you showing your team how to navigate both worlds? Because we depend on these platforms to gain visibility, to promote. Maybe there's a big sale coming up of our product, or we just did a big reorg and we're really proud of what that looks like. And these are some of the things that we're all facing. And no one handed us a manual. No one said, here's how this works, people. Now go. It was more like, hey, look, this is here now. Go see what happens.
Right. Yeah. This is cool. Let's see what happens next.
Yeah. Oh, I got, why did I get 5,000 likes on my wilted sandwich? My wilted lettuce sandwich. I got no likes on this thing that I did that I'm so proud of. That's the weird dynamic that you're getting at. And I know, Valerie, because I follow you on LinkedIn, that you are really good about putting out I call high quality content where there's value and you're sharing something and there are teachable moments and you're wanting to be positive. And for leaders listening to this, tying this up with a nice bow, linking it back to what you do, how you help people, what's one more thing that you can share with us to help us cut through the chaos and the confusion and the overwhelm that so many leaders feel today because of how much we're now having to think through to operate our businesses?
One of the hardest things for business owners and CEO is a feeling of isolation and loneliness. It does feel lonely at the top. And even if you're not the perfect leader, but you're still trying to lead your organization and you're doing, well, you feel isolated because there's certain things that you cannot talk to your employees about. You can't express how sometimes overwhelmingly smothering the worry is about making payroll every month, right? If sales are down, you're like, oh my God, how am I going to make payroll? You're worried about a strategic decision and how that will impact the business. Is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? Because every decision and move that you make has an impact across the organization. And interestingly, one of the things that I've heard most from clients that I've worked with is, although they appreciated the business transformation and the growth and all that kind of stuff,
right,
one of the things they most appreciated is they had someone to talk to that they could trust, to express their concerns to, their worries to, their hopes and dreams, right? Because the business is their baby. They want it to work. And I think naturally they're concerned that a fractional COO like myself is going to come in and just try to take over the business and run everything yourself. And that's not how I work. My job is to help them be successful and help their team members be successful, right? That the best moment for me is that moment when the business leader and the team have done something that they've never been able to do before. And I just get to sit back and smile quietly while they take all of the bravos and applause. And so I think if someone is a business owner that is feeling isolated, is feeling overwhelmed and frustrated, even if you just work with a fractional COO for a project or for a short period of time, it's something to help you deal with the stress of being a business owner.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the reasons that you're doing the things that you're doing on social and why you came to talk to me and Team PYP is you are teaching us that there is another way, that this way works, that you don't have to feel so alone. And I echo that loneliness. Wow, it is pervasive. And it's an interesting line between being a leader and being vulnerable and authentic, which are two buzzwords that get hashtag vulnerable, hashtag authentic, right? All over the place. And yet there, to your point, there are things that as a leader, you can't share with everybody because it could just mean the end. I mean, I don't mean to sound so, dire, but there are just certain things that you don't disclose. The time may come down the road, but it's learning those boundaries. And I'm sure that some of the work that you do with your CEOs when you work with them is a COO helps by its nature. A system is a boundary, and it helps establish what can and can't be done. And I remember hearing a man speak about getting married. He had been a professional football player, so lived that lifestyle, and transitioned into. He wrote a play, and then that was off Broadway for a long time, and then he embraced the internet to spread his message of our personal stories and how powerful they are, and how to learn how to tell them, and then how to learn how to use them. And one of the stories he told about was when he got married to his high school sweetheart. So many of his colleagues were like, "Man, you're just missing out." And he said, "No, marriage is the greatest form of freedom because I don't have to think about anything else anymore." And isn't that an interesting way? People think that you've made, and that's one of the biggest fears of leaders is if I make a decision, I'm cutting off all these other options. I don't want to cut off because, and I imagine that's something that you have conversations about, that is helping them let go. Maybe not, well, maybe of people, you did mention that, but of parts of things to focus on one in order to grow fast, right? They buy speed with you, as you said. And then maybe looking at, we could bring this in again if it makes sense down the road.
And sometimes they're worried about things that they shouldn't even be worried about, that they should just let go of. This was something from earlier in your business. It no longer applies to your current business. Growth is hard, but I believe that if we stopped thinking of that phrase, growth is what happens outside your comfort zone. And I'd like to politely disagree with that. Because every time I hear that, I think, oh my God, every morning I woke up, I'm trying to grow and be, 10% better than I was yesterday. And if we looked at growth as a natural part of life and a natural part of a business and accepted that growth is messy and sometimes it doesn't turn out the way we want to be, and sometimes we interpret that as pain. If we could accept it as a normal part of life and think of standing still as painful, if we lived in a growth zone instead of a comfort zone, I think a lot of people would be able to move their business forward faster.
I like that. Thank you for bringing that up and emphasizing that, growth is painful, but so what? Staying where you are, you're not happy now.
Right. Yeah. Do you want to stay where you're at, or do you want to change? Right.
Exactly.
The quintessential dilemma.
Oh boy, is it ever. Well, one of the books that is very popular, speaking of conformity and growth, is a book that you have a different opinion about. And I ask my guests on this show because Team PYP is a reading audience. I would like you to first talk about a book that is very popular and has been recommended on this show more than any other, and why you think what you do about it. And then I would like you to share a book that has made a difference to you, Valerie, that you think is just fantastic.
Right. Well, I do have sort of an unusual opinion. It's The Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. For some reason, that book is written in a way that just does not resonate for me at all. I remember the first time I read it, I got about halfway through and I'm like, I don't like this book. It's not inspiring me. It's not encouraging me. And I just put it aside. And then I went back several years later and tried to read it again because everyone says what a great book it is, right? How meaningful it is and how fabulous it is. And so I tried to read it again. I think I've tried to read it 3 times now, and it just doesn't resonate for me. I don't connect with the book. It doesn't inspire or motivate me. It makes me feel a little flat. And I think the message there is just because something works for everybody else doesn't mean it works for you. I'm sure there are books that I read that people are like, that's a stupid book, Valerie. And so, when you're consuming information, you need to find what works for you and what helps you move forward. And one of the first books I read about personal growth and personal development, achieving your goals, when I was riding the bike to the library, was The Magic of Thinking Big by David Schwartz. Even though written so long ago.
Like, was that 60s?
I feel like it was either the early 60s or the late 50s even.
I think it actually may be the mid 50s. I know.
Oh,
yeah. Or the early 60s, but yes. Okay.
Yeah, I really liked that because in the situation I was in, with some parenting difficulties, I wasn't getting positive, you can do it kind of feedback, right? I was getting a lot of, I think we would call it a verbally abusive situation. I think that's what we call it today. And Thinking Big really opened up my way of thinking and realized that how I think is what's going to help me out of this situation, which is eventually what happened.
Yeah. Great book. Yeah, I have that on audio. I haven't listened to that for a while. So thank you for reminding me that I should go back to it. It's definitely a timeless and much more accessible than thinking, he wrote that. Napoleon Hill wrote that, from my understanding. He deliberately made it a riddle.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't come out and blatantly say this. He says, there's a secret in this book and you're going to have to find it. I mean, that's kind of like the thing. And it can, for a lot of people, it's been maddening. And then they just say, you know what? There's so many other books. So thank you for bringing that one up. And before we wrap things up, Valerie, where can people find you online? Where do you hang out most? What's your website? All those good links.
Well, I hang out most on LinkedIn and Instagram. On LinkedIn, I'm Valerie Hayes. I think you can also do a search on Fractional COO and find me on LinkedIn. On Instagram, I'm Valerie M. Hayes, M as in Mary. And I'm also on Facebook, but a little bit less often. Mm-hmm. And my website is Valerie, Valerie, Hayes, Hayes.com. I really am one of those people that responds to every message myself. My VA doesn't do it. I do. So, I try to be accessible because I want fewer businesses to fail. I want them to be able to achieve their dreams.
Yeah. Yeah. Clearly, you're so passionate about helping businesses get those results that they just haven't, for all the reasons you brought up today, plus probably a gazillion more, because we humans are complicated, and yet the solutions are often so simple, but we need someone else to help us see them. And
we're all the same way. It's very hard to see your own stuff. Even if you're the most brilliant person on the face of the earth, it's hard to see your own stuff.
Yeah.
And that's what makes us vulnerable.
Yeah. And we live in a time when talking about being vulnerable is okay. And it's okay to admit, I can't do all of this. A generation ago, or especially two, there's that whole John Wayne mythology and the lone cowboy and, or cowgirl. And it just, So it's, this has been so great, Valerie. You really have, you light up the world with what you do.
Thank you, Mary Lou.
You've lit up my day. Thank you so much for taking your time today to talk to me and Team PYP. And I wish you continued success as you are out there truly as a servant leader and helping businesses grow.
Well, thanks, Mary Lou. It's been an honor to be on the show.
Hey team, Mary Lou here. Who's number one in football changes from year to year. Fashion trends come and go, same with musical tastes. But leadership skills, they never go out of style. In fact, these days, leadership is an essential survival skill for a world that demands more from us than ever before. To succeed these days, you need to know how to show up for yourself so that you can then do the work you love with people you like the way you want. The Play Your Position Leadership Playbook helps you do this, and it's free. Go to pyppodcast.com to download your copy today. If being more successful this year, next year, in the 21st century is on your to-do list, get your copy of the Play Your Position Leadership Playbook now. pyppodcast.com. It's at the top of the page. You can't miss it. That's pyppodcast.com, and start being more of the leader you are meant to be today. This podcast was produced by Daniel Romeros. Show notes for this episode can be found over at pyppodcast.com. I'm Mary Lou Kaiser. Thanks for listening.
Here at the Play Your Position podcast, we believe that the road to self-mastery and a life well lived starts with answering the call to leadership. That's when the fun really begins. Send this episode to any friends who might need to hear the inspiration and ideas you heard today. And feel free to rate and review us on your favorite podcast platform.